cracked EGR cooler in the middle of the nullarbor. No phone signal. That's the truck the dealer never mentioned. At number 5, we've got the Iveco Stralis, built for the Australian market from 2002 through to 2012, running the second generation Cursor engine in 10 and 13 litre form, putting out anywhere from 430 to 540 horsepower, depending on spec. Truckies who ran the AS and ASL series on B-double linehaul worked between capital cities remember the same pattern showing up on higher mileage trucks. Dashboard warning lights that flare up for no traceable reason, electrical wiring faults that chase their tail through the loom, and EGR coolers that crack long before the rest of the truck is tired. Stick around, because the truck sitting at number 1 on this list is still rolling off the production line today, and it might be the one that surprises you most. None of that is a one-off horror story either. Industry press covering the Stralis in this country used almost the exact same word every time. Mechanical issues dogged the model's reputation for reliability, and that reputation stuck to the Cursor engine specifically, not just to a bad batch or a rough year. Mechanics who grew up on Detroit and Cummins motors found the Cursor a different kind of animal to work on, and outside the capital cities, parts support and Cursor-trained hands were thin even when the truck was brand new. Break down at a roadhouse out past the nullarbor with a Stralis fault code flashing, and the nearest bloke who actually knows the Cursor inside and out could be a full day's drive away. Compare that to what Iveco builds now. The S-Way that replaced the Stralis dropped the EGR system entirely, running a single after-treatment setup that doesn't need the driver to babysit a regen cycle, and Iveco doubled down on the warranty to back it. That's the tell. When a manufacturer redesigns the exact system that gave the old truck its bad name, that's the manufacturer admitting the mechanics were right the whole time. The Stralis is out of production, but plenty are still parked in yards and still being passed along second-hand, and every mechanic who's opened one up has a story about the Cursor that they don't mind telling twice. At number 4, we've got the DAF CF and XF Euro 6 spec, built from 2018 right through to today at the Kenworth plant here in Australia, running Paccar's MX-11 and MX-13 engines under a badge that still carries some old scars from decades back, when the earliest DAFs sold here were put into work they were never built for, and the reputation stuck around longer than the trucks did. Owner-drivers running the current CF and XF long haul report a specific gremlin turning up more than once. The AdBlue system pulling the engine into a derate at the worst possible moment, along with driveline overheating on runs with a lot of idle time, like wharf work or livestock loading, where the truck sits and waits more than it rolls. A derate isn't subtle either. The truck simply refuses to give full power until the fault clears, which is no drama on a quiet stretch of the Hume, but a genuine problem hauling a loaded B-double up a range with traffic banked up behind. None of that stops the CF and XF from being a genuinely solid highway truck day to day, and plenty of owners will tell you straight that theirs has been reliable for years, turbos and engines included. But the derate is the real tell here, not the badge and not the cab. It's not a worn part or a tired seal. It's the emissions system itself deciding the truck isn't allowed to make full power, sometimes hundreds of kilometres from a depot that can actually diagnose the fault code properly instead of just clearing it and hoping. Compare that to a mechanically injected diesel with no SCR system to babysit and no dosing unit that can fail. A truck that just needs fuel, air and compression, and doesn't care whether the driver remembered to top up a tank of diesel exhaust fluid at the last roadhouse hundreds of kilometres back down the road. That derate is nothing compared to what's sitting at number 3, where the truck doesn't even give the driver a mirror to check while the dash is lighting up. At number 3, we've got the Mercedes-Benz Actros fitted with MirrorCam, on sale in Australia since 2020. The first heavy vehicle in this country to replace its side mirrors entirely with cameras and cabin screens. Instead of a bit of glass and a bracket, the driver's looking at a pair of arms mounted with lenses feeding a screen down near the A-pillar, wired into a multimedia cockpit that runs 2 separate high-resolution displays where a set of analog dials used to sit, plus radar and camera systems handling automatic braking and lane assistance in the background. Mercedes-Benz will tell you the replacement cost for a damaged MirrorCam arm is only around $1,000, about what a traditional mirror costs anyway. But that number assumes the part is in stock at a dealership, and the fault is nothing more than a cracked housing, not a wiring or software problem buried behind the dash. Out on a corrugated dirt road with a truck 3 days from the nearest depot, a fault in the camera feed or the display itself isn't something a bloke with a socket set and a torch can talk his way around, the way he could with a mirror that's just come loose on its mount. That's the real shift with this generation of Actros. The mechanical driveline underneath is the same well-proven engine family Mercedes has run since 2016, and nobody's picking a fight with that engine on its own. It's the layer sitting on top of it, the cameras, the touch screens, the computing power needed to run all of it, that turns what used to be a simple visual check into a diagnostic job requiring a laptop and a dealer connection. A driver used to a mirror can glance sideways and know instantly if something's wrong. A driver watching a screen has to trust that the screen itself is telling the truth, and trust that dust, heat and vibration haven't quietly cooked something behind that dashboard over a few 100,000 kilometres of outback running. At number 2, the truck that swaps cab overs for a bonnet brings its own list of electronic gremlins straight from the factory floor. At number 2, we've got the Freightliner Cascadia, the bonneted prime mover that took over from the Argosy on Australian order books from 2023 onward, built on the same global Daimler platform running here as it does in North America. That's exactly why the paper trail on this one is longer than most. Manufacturer recall notices on this generation have covered a steering gear fault capable of a full loss of steering control, an electronic stability system that could misjudge a tyre's grip mid-corner during a hard turn, and corrosion inside the front brake modulator valve that can pull the truck to one side under brake. None of those notices are Australian specific. They're the same global platform recalls issued through the manufacturer's home market, but the truck sitting on an Australian yard today is built off that identical electronic architecture, stability system and all, so the underlying design is what's actually being sold here. What ties all 3 faults together is the same thread running through this whole list. The more a truck leans on sensors and software to keep itself pointed straight and stopped, the more ways there are for something small, a corroded valve, a miscalibrated sensor, a software parameter that never got flagged, to become the reason a driver loses control at highway speed with a loaded trailer behind. A mechanic working on an older bonneted truck can trace a brake pull to a worn shoe or a sticking caliper in an afternoon with hand tools. On a Cascadia, that same symptom might trace back through a control module and a wiring harness before a wrench ever gets picked up. And a workshop without the right diagnostic laptop and software license can be stuck simply waiting on a call-out. The Cascadia is a comfortable, modern truck to drive, and Freightliner's dealer network isn't slowing down on selling them across the country. But at number 1, the truck that closes this list is the one nearly every mechanic in this country already has an opinion about, and it's still rolling off the line today. At number 1, we've got the Kenworth T610, fitted with the Paccar MX-13. In production since 2017, and still one of the biggest sellers on the road today, which is exactly why this one stings more than the rest of the list. This isn't a badge nobody trusts or a model everyone's already stopped buying. It's a Kenworth, the truck this whole channel is built around, wearing an engine that a huge slice of the mechanics who service it would rather not touch if there's an alternative on the order form. The MX-13's recurring list reads like a greatest hits of modern diesel headaches. EGR valves clogging with soot under sustained heavy pulling on long climbs, DPF regeneration cycles that fail to complete on long grades, turbo actuators sticking and triggering a derate out of nowhere, and injectors that some owners have had replaced more than once inside the engine's working life. None of that means every MX-13 is a lemon. Plenty rack up huge distances with no drama at all if they're maintained on schedule and never allowed to idle hard for hours on end. But it does mean the truck that's supposed to represent everything this list stands for. Simple, tough, fixable, at a bush workshop with basic tools is now being sold new with a motor that leans on exactly the kind of sensors and after-treatment gear this whole video has been warning you about. Talk to a fleet mechanic in a workshop off the Stewart Highway and you'll often hear the same line, that the MX-13 isn't a bad engine so much as a demanding one. And demanding isn't a word this audience wants attached to a Kenworth. Compare that to the Cummins X15 sitting in the same chassis on the same order form. The engine that diesel technicians will steer a customer toward every time because parts are easier to source through independent suppliers and the fix is usually simpler once the bonnet's up. The dealership will still sell you the MX-13 with a straight face and a full order book. Whether the bloke who has to fix it 3 years from now agrees with that sales pitch is a different question entirely. Every truck on this list shares the same fault line. Not a bad badge, not a weak chassis, just more circuitry standing between the driver and a fix that used to take an afternoon with hand tools. The real cost isn't only on the invoice, it's counted in derates on a hill, cameras that can't be squinted at, and modules that need a laptop before a wrench turns. None of that stops dealers moving units off the yard every week because the sale happens long before the fault code does. The trucks that go the distance out here are still the ones built simple enough for a bush workshop to open up and understand. If you reckon the old iron still has a place out on the road, stick around. Drop a comment and tell us which of these 5 you've actually driven or had to fix yourself. There's a difference between the truck a driver trusts and the truck a manufacturer wants to sell.